It was an autumn afternoon in Central Park when golden leaves danced in the wind, like confetti celebrating the change of seasons. Henry Aldrich, a reserved 45-year-old billionaire, sat alone on a weathered wooden bench. His custom-tailored suit seemed out of place in the relaxed park atmosphere. Absent-mindedly, he turned a gold ring with an embedded sapphire on his finger, a family heirloom passed down from his grandmother, Margaret Aldrich. The ring was a tether to the past, a comfort in his otherwise isolated world. Children's laughter from the nearby playground pulled Henry from his thoughts. Despite his wealth and accomplishments as the CEO of Aldrich Holdings, he often felt a void when faced with such unrestrained joy. Solitary dinners in opulent dining rooms, endless meetings, and the grandeur of the Aldrich estate all seemed hollow in moments like these. Your ring is so shiny, like a star. A cheerful voice interrupted his musings. Henry looked down to see a red-haired girl, no older than 6, with bright green eyes filled with curiosity. "My name is Emma," she said, approaching without hesitation. "Can I see it up close?" Henry couldn't help but smile, a rarity for the man known for his stern demeanor. "Of course," he said, holding out his hand. Emma's freckled face lit up as she examined the sapphire. "It's amazing. My mom has one just like it." The world seemed to pause. Henry's breath caught in his chest. This ring was unique, custom-made for his grandmother in the 1950s. His voice trembled as he asked, "Your mom has one like this?" "Emma, don't bother him." A woman's voice called from nearby. A woman in her early 30s hurried over, her expression shifting to one of shock when she saw the ring. She introduced herself as Claire Bennett, gently guiding Emma away. "I'm so sorry if she disturbed you. Emma has a vivid imagination." "It's no trouble at all," Henry replied, standing. His sharp eyes studied Claire, noting her refined posture, delicate features, and the silver chain around her neck. She instinctively touched it, as though protecting something precious. As the two walked away, Henry sat back down, mind racing. His grandmother's cryptic words on her deathbed echoed in his memory. "There are secrets tied to this ring. Henry, when the time is right, you'll understand." That day in Central Park, Henry realized he might have stumbled upon one of those secrets. For the first time in years, curiosity burned within him. The next morning, Henry arrived early at his office, overlooking Manhattan. The sunrise painted the city in golden hues. But Henry's focus was on a cedar box he had pulled from his desk drawer. Inside were items he hadn't touched in years: photographs, letters, and a diary belonging to his grandmother. The first photo he examined showed Margaret at a garden party in 1955. She was radiant, but beside her stood a man whose face had been torn from the picture. On the back, an inscription read, "Summer 1955, the beginning of everything." Henry opened the diary, scanning entries until one stopped him cold. June 15th, 1955. "Today, I met someone who changed everything. Richard isn't interested in the Aldrich name or fortune. With him, I'm just Margaret. But I know this happiness can't last. Father would never approve." His assistant's voice interrupted over the intercom. "Mr. Aldrich, your first meeting is in 20 minutes. Cancel everything," he replied. He was in no mood for business today. Moments later, his private investigator, Thomas, called. "Mr. Aldrich, I have information on Claire Bennett. Her maiden name is Claire Collins. She's an art restorer at the Metropolitan Museum and a widow. But there's something odd. Her birth records have been altered." Henry's grip on the phone tightened. "Altered how?" "It's hard to say, but there's one name that keeps coming up: Richard Collins." The name struck Henry like lightning. He flipped back to the diary, finding an entry that read, "September 20th, 1955. I gave my heart to Richard today, along with my mother's sapphire ring. If it ever returns to the Aldrich family, it will mean our paths have crossed again." Henry's mind raced. Was Richard Claire's grandfather? How had the ring returned to his grandmother? And what secrets had been buried for decades? Later that day, Henry called Claire. Her voice was hesitant as she answered. Restoration Department. Claire Bennett speaking. Ms. Bennett, this is Henry Aldrich. I believe we need to discuss a certain ring. They met at a quiet cafe on the Upper East Side. Claire sat nervously at a corner table, fingering the chain around her neck. When Henry arrived, she straightened. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he began, pulling out the torn photograph. Do you recognize anyone here? Claire's hands trembled as she examined it. That's my grandfather, Richard. He told me about Margaret Aldrich. He said she was the love of his life. Henry's heart pounded. May I see your ring? After a pause, Claire revealed the sapphire ring hanging from her chain. It was identical to Henry's. The two rings gleamed side by side, proof of a connection that spanned generations. My grandmother gave this to Richard, Claire explained, tears in her eyes. He said it was a symbol of a love that could never be erased. Henry shared what he knew from the diary. They never stopped loving each other. But why did they part? Claire pulled out a set of old letters. My grandfather kept these but never opened them. I think the answers are here. The two returned to the Aldrich estate. In the Grand Library, they opened Margaret's letters, piecing together a story of love, betrayal, and sacrifice. Margaret and Richard had been separated by Margaret's father, William, who discovered Richard was investigating the family's wartime dealings. To protect the family name, William forced Richard to leave, threatening Margaret with scandal and ruin. The last clue came from Margaret's final letter. The truth is hidden where eternal hope meets the rising sun. The search led them to the conservatory, Margaret's favorite place. There, they found a hidden compartment containing a map drawn on sheet music. Following its clues, they discovered a secret chamber filled with documents exposing the Aldrich family's dark history, money laundering, trafficking, and stolen art. As they processed the revelations, a shadow fell across the room. It was William's trusted aide, Malcolm, holding a gun. You should have left this buried, he growled. Before Malcolm could act, a gunshot rang out. Behind him stood George Aldrich, Henry's estranged uncle, holding an old pistol. It's time to end this, George said. Over the following weeks, Henry and Claire worked together to expose the truth. They transformed the Aldrich Mansion into the headquarters for the Eternal Hope Foundation, a charity dedicated to reuniting families and righting the wrongs of the past. On the day of its opening, Henry stood with Claire and Emma in the restored conservatory. This is a new chapter for our family, he said, one built on hope and love, not secrets. As Emma played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata on the piano, Henry looked at Claire, their rings glinting in the sunlight. Together, they had uncovered the past and forged a brighter future, one where love had finally found its way. In the weeks that followed the opening of the Eternal Hope Foundation, the Aldrich Mansion became a beacon of change. The once secretive estate now welcomed families, journalists, and historians uncovering decades of hidden truths. Henry found himself balancing the demands of his business empire with his newfound purpose, mending the legacy of the Aldrich name. One crisp morning, Henry stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city below alive with activity. In his hands was a letter Claire had discovered among the chamber's documents, a letter addressed to Margaret, written by Richard after their forced separation. Dearest Margaret, I hope this letter reaches you, though I fear it may not. Your father's threats have forced me to leave, but my love for you has not wavered. I promise to protect you, even if it meant walking away. If there ever comes a day when the truth can be told, know that I never stopped loving you. Yours always, Richard. Henry folded the letter carefully and placed it on his desk. Each revelation deepened his resolve to turn the Aldrich legacy into a force for good. Claire arrived later that day with Emma, her excitement palpable. We've just received a grant application, she said, holding up a folder. It's from a group working to reunite families separated by war. Henry smiled, his heart warmed by the foundation's impact. Let's fund it. Full support. As they discussed plans, Emma explored the library, her small hands trailing over the leather-bound books. "Mom, look," she called, pulling a thick journal from a lower shelf. "It has music notes like the ones we found in the conservatory." Claire's breath caught as she opened the journal. It was Margaret's musical notebook, filled with compositions she had written during her time with Richard. In the margins were annotations, dates, locations, and cryptic notes. "What's this?" Claire wondered aloud, pointing to a faded entry. "For the day love finds its voice again." Henry leaned closer, his expression thoughtful. "Perhaps she meant for us to finish what they couldn't." That evening, they returned to the conservatory, where the grand piano stood as a centerpiece of renewal. Emma, now a budding pianist inspired by her discoveries, placed Margaret's music on the stand. With a child's determination, she began to play. The room filled with hauntingly beautiful melodies, fragments of Margaret's unfinished symphony. As the notes echoed, Claire felt tears welling in her eyes. She was speaking through her music, wasn't she? Henry nodded. It's as if she knew this moment would come. They decided to commission musicians to complete the symphony, a testament to the enduring power of love and art. The symphony would debut at the Foundation's first gala, uniting people under a shared mission of hope and restoration. In the days leading up to the event, the mansion buzzed with activity. Media outlets covered the Aldridge family's transformation, and donations poured in to support the Foundation's causes. For Henry, the work was both exhausting and exhilarating. One evening, as he reviewed final preparations, George approached him. Despite his frailty, George's presence commanded respect. "You've done well, Henry," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I never thought I'd see this family's name redeemed." Henry clasped his uncle's hand. "You gave me the courage to uncover the truth. None of this would have been possible without you." George chuckled weakly. "Perhaps, but you're the one who turned the truth into something meaningful." The gala was a resounding success. The mansion glittered with lights, its conservatory transformed into a concert hall. Guests from all walks of life gathered to hear Margaret's symphony, completed after decades of silence. As the final notes played, a standing ovation filled the room. Henry and Claire stood side by side, their rings gleaming under the chandeliers. Emma beamed from the piano, her love for music and discovery now an integral part of the family's future. In his closing remarks, Henry addressed the crowd. The Aldridge name once stood for secrecy and power. Today, it stands for truth and hope. We cannot change the past, but we can honor it by building a better future. In the quiet moments after the gala, Henry and Claire walked through the conservatory, now filled with vibrant flowers and the warmth of shared memories. "Do you think they'd be proud?" Claire asked, gazing at the stars visible through the glass ceiling. Henry wrapped an arm around her. "I know they would be. They believed in love's power to endure, and we've proven them right." As they stood there, their silhouettes framed by the glowing garden, they knew this was only the beginning. Together, they would continue uncovering truths, helping families heal, and ensuring that love, like Margaret and Richard's, would never be forgotten.